Yo, you're watching the Screaming Fish here, people, and once again, I am here for yet another movie review, but this time, I'm reviewing a movie that I have been waiting for pretty much since the first trailer dropped in 2015. So, without further ado, let's get into my review of Suicide Squad. Let's get into it. So, after the disappointment that many fans and critics felt following the release of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, a lot of people really didn't have hope for this franchise. That was until the second round of Suicide Squad trailers came round. And now, the movie is out, and people who are watching this review who haven't seen this movie are going to be wondering, is this movie better or worse than Batman v Superman? And is it even a good movie and worth seeing? Well, let's find out. Figuring they're all expendable, a US intelligence officer decides to assemble a team of dangerous, incarcerated supervillains for a top-secret mission. Now armed with government weapons, Deadshot, played by Will Smith, Harley Quinn, played by Margot Robbie, Captain Boomerang, Killer Croc, and other despicable inmates must learn to work together, dubbed Task Force X. The criminals unite to battle a mysterious and powerful entity, while the diabolical Joker, played by Jared Leto, launches an evil agenda of his own. You're probably going to be thinking, I feel the same level of heat that everyone on Rotten Tomatoes is feeling towards this movie. Well, on the contrary, I flippin' love this movie. I honestly haven't had this much fun in the theater since I saw Deadpool for the first time. It's absolutely fantastic. I really like the characters in this movie. It's the only DCEU film so far that's actually made me care and feel for its characters, and all of them are very likable. For starters, Will Smith as Deadshot was brilliant. He is by far the most interesting character because you really feel for him, particularly because he does what he does for his daughter, which actually makes him unique to some of the other characters in the squad. And it's an overall great performance, and I really hope to see more from Deadshot in future DC films. Not to mention, it was pleasing seeing him interact with characters like El Diablo and Harley Quinn. And speaking of Harley Quinn, Margot Robbie steals the show as Harley Quinn. She just nailed the role perfectly, and it's the first time we're actually seeing Harley Quinn on screen for the first time, and she's nailed her performance perfectly, and it was just phenomenal. I also really like Jared Leto as the Joker. He brought a new aspect to the character that we really haven't seen before on the screen, at least. This version of the Joker is the most psychotic version I've seen on screen so far, and I loved it. Admittedly, he's not in the movie much. He's not in the movie as much as I thought he'd be, which is something I really do think people have overreacted to. Now, don't get me wrong. I know a lot of fans and people really wanted to see more of him, and I can understand that because Joker really is the most popular character. Is one of the most popular characters in DC at the moment. But I actually didn't mind him not being in it much, because this is called Suicide Squad. So obviously it's going to revolve mostly around the squad themselves. So this movie isn't about the Joker, and it's not even about Batman, who is in this film, but I'll get to him a little later. This isn't even the last we'll see of the Joker either, as I'm very sure he'll be the main antagonist of Ben Affleck's solo Batman film. I never thought I'd say this, but honestly, Jai Courtney was actually good in this movie as Captain Boomerang. This is by far Jai Courtney's best performance. I thought Captain Boomerang himself was a great character in this movie, and I liked him a lot, and thankfully he didn't turn into one of those really annoying comic relief characters. He was really likable. He was just a really likable character, and that was not annoying at all. Joel Kinnaman gave a surprisingly emotional performance as Rick Flag. I actually felt sorry for him in quite a lot of scenes, and he like pretty much everyone else in this was just a really likable character and well written. Another character who was also surprised me was Jay Hernandez. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. As El Diablo, he was a surprisingly interesting character, and I found his performance to be pretty good. I think he has the most interesting backstory next to Deadshot out of the whole team. I also liked Cara Delevingne as Enchantress. She gave a pretty cool performance, and I liked how she bounced from one character to to another, because essentially, like in the comics, Enchantress is two people in one body, and I think Cara Delevingne handled that part of the character remarkably well. I really liked seeing the team interact with each other. For example, that scene in the bar is one of my favorite scenes in the movie because of the chemistry between the characters and the way they interact with each other. Also, before I forget, Batman. He was great in this movie. He was only in there for a few minutes, but he was awesome. Ben Affleck has really taken the role as the Cape Crusader really well, and I really enjoyed seeing Batman from a criminal's perspective, and I really want to see Batman in a great Ben Affleck in a great Batman film when his solo film comes out. Not to mention, there was a cameo that I didn't think was going to happen, and they added, and I didn't really think they were going to add it to the movie and it is to do with the Justice League. And while in Batman v Superman, it just peed me off. This time, it was amazing, and I'm really glad they put it in. I'm not going to spoil who the cameo was, though. So, the story itself is a really intriguing premise, in my opinion. If you think about it, up until now, we've never actually had a comic book movie that's entirely about supervillains, and I think it nailed that aspect of the movie perfectly. And yes, it can get a little simple, and it does have a couple of comic book movie cliches here and there, but overall I found it to be a really interesting and mostly original and fun story. And while it is a pretty grounded film, it honestly didn't bother me, so I was able to look past that. Not to mention, this is a much more light-hearted film than the last two DCEU films, which is quite refreshing to see, because I, for one, am getting really tired of this overly dark tone most DC films seem to have, and it was actually a pretty funny movie. This movie actually had me laughing quite a bit. So, effects-wise, this film used practical effects for a lot of the action sequences, which I really respect and like, because it's not something that happens a lot in superhero movies these days. A lot of them are actually heavily reliant on CGI, which I can see why, because if you got some characters say like Vision or Iron Man or even Superman, they pretty much need CGI in order to work. But this film went all out practical for the most part, at least, and thankfully only used CGI when absolutely necessary, and you can really tell they put a lot of work on the makeup design for Killer Croc, and I'm not kidding, Killer Croc's entire look is entirely practical. No CGI required, and it looks amazing, and thankfully the CGI looks good and well done. And speaking of the action, it's probably the most realistic action I've seen in a movie like this. The only other comic book movie I can think of that's actually more realistic than this movie in terms of action is The Dark Knight, which is actually one of my favorite movies of all time. While there were a few moments where you'd think, wait, how'd that happen? It's still a blast from start to finish, and a lot of the action is actually pretty amazing and well choreographed. In fact, this movie is the most comic book movie I've ever seen. What exactly do I mean by that? Well, this is one of the only comic book movies I've seen that truly embraces the madness of it all, similar to what Deadpool did. But I mean, in terms of the characters themselves, the abilities they possess, and the story themselves, the story itself, which really adds to the film's overall enjoyment, and it does this with flying colours. Well, I did like the villain, and who did feel like a menacing and threatening force. The villain had a very obvious weakness that is not at all utilized, which does make a few of the characters look pretty dumb. But again, I like the villain. He or she was a very menacing force in the movie, in my opinion, and worked as a villain at least. So the last thing I really want to talk about, which is honestly one of my favorite parts of the movie, the soundtrack. The soundtrack for this movie is amazing. It included some really memorable classic songs while blending it in with new and also memorable songs. And thankfully, the composer knew when to play the songs at the right time. So, overall, I really enjoyed this movie. It's the best fun I've had all year, with brilliant performances from pretty much the entire cast, surprisingly realistic action and a well-written story and an intriguing premise and great characters. Sorry, Rotten Tomatoes, I'm not feeling it this time. Is this by far the best film in the DCEU so far? Yes, I'd say it is, and it's gotten me excited for future films in the franchise. It's definitely in the 10 best I've seen all year, and it's not just a great comic book movie or a great DC film. It's a great movie in general, in my opinion, and it's definitely one I would watch again. Yeah, I really want to see Suicide Squad again, and I'm definitely get it on. If they release a special edition, then yes, I hope they release a special edition because because particularly for fans who were disappointed with the Joker, because if they release a special edition similar to what Batman v Superman did, then they could add more scenes with the Joker in it. But overall, I really enjoyed this movie. It's one of the best I've seen all year. And yeah, so guys, thank you for watching my review of Suicide Squad. Do hope you enjoyed it, and I will indeed see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.